I've been rehearsing what I'd say for 21 years. Not in some therapeutic healing way. In a when they finally need me, I'll be ready way. And 3 weeks ago, my phone started blowing up from a number I didn't recognize. My parents, Connor and Priscilla, made it clear from birth that I ruined everything. I was the accident baby. My mother had a nursing scholarship lined up when she got pregnant at 23. My father was supposed to relocate to Denver for a promotion. Instead, they got stuck in Dayton with a kid neither of them wanted. They reminded me of this constantly. Every meal I ate was thrown in my face. Every pair of shoes. Every school supply. The summer I turned 15, things escalated. They'd been fighting about money and about me specifically. I heard Priscilla tell Connor that keeping me around was bleeding them dry, and that I needed to learn to survive on my own or get out. Connor agreed and said he'd handle it. One Thursday in July, they woke me at 6 and said we were driving to a state park with a lake about 40 minutes out. I was confused because we never did family activities. But I was 15 and still stupidly hoping they'd eventually love me. So I got in their Chevy Blazer without questioning it. When we got to the lake, Connor pulled a half-deflated tube from the trunk and threw it at my chest. He told me to swim or sink, called me an ungrateful brat, and said I needed to prove I was worth something. Then, they both got back in the car. Priscilla rolled down her window and told me they'd be back in a few hours, maybe. She was laughing. They cranked up the radio and drove off while I stood there holding this limp piece of rubber. I want to be clear about something. I couldn't swim. They knew I couldn't swim. I'd nearly drowned at a neighbor's pool when I was 9, and they never let me take lessons because it cost money. Yo, I need everyone watching this to sit with that detail for a second. They knew he couldn't swim. This wasn't negligent parenting. This wasn't tough love gone wrong. These people ran the numbers. They calculated. A half-deflated tube? That's not an accident. That's plausible deniability. That's, well, Your Honor, we gave him a flotation device. These two sat in their kitchen, probably over morning coffee, and planned out how to dispose of their child like he was an old couch they didn't want to pay to dump properly. And the laughing? Rolling up the window and cranking the radio? That's movie villain behavior. Except movie villains usually have some tragic backstory or complex motivation. Connor and Priscilla's motivation was, we wanted different stuff and this kid is inconvenient. The banality of that evil is what gets me. I don't know why I got in that water. Pride, maybe. Or the desperate belief that if I just did what they wanted, things would change. The tube flipped within minutes. I went under. Came up. Went under again. I swallowed so much water that everything started going gray. A man named Carl was fishing from a small boat about 200 yards out. He saw me struggling and got to me right before I went under for what would have been the last time. He pulled me into his boat and I was blue-lipped and shaking so hard I couldn't speak. When I finally could, he asked where my parents were. I told him I was an orphan. I told him I didn't have any parents. That wasn't a lie. Not really. Carl called emergency services. He stayed with me at the hospital. He contacted Child Protective Services because I refused to give him any family information. I was placed in foster care that same week. Connor and Priscilla never reported me missing, never looked for me, never tried to get me back. Can we talk about Carl for a second? Because this random fisherman did more parenting in one afternoon than Connor and Priscilla did in 15 years. Stayed at the hospital, called CPS, made sure this kid was okay. Carl probably went home that night, kissed his own kids, and lost sleep wondering if that boy would be all right. Meanwhile, Connor and Priscilla drove home, probably stopped for drive-through, watched TV, went to bed, and just continued existing. Never filed a missing persons report. And look, I've worked retail jobs where we had to file more paperwork for a missing shopping cart than these people did for their missing child. The system asked them 0 questions because they never made a single phone call. That tells you everything about how invisible this kid was to them, not just emotionally invisible, but administratively invisible. He didn't exist in their world anymore, and they were relieved. I aged out of the system at 18, worked my way through community college, then a state university, got into property management. I'm 36 now, and I own 3 small apartment buildings outright. I live in Columbus, about an hour from where they still live, in the same house they tried to abandon me from. 3 weeks ago, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It said, "This is your mother. We need to talk, it's urgent." I didn't respond. Then the calls started, 30, 40 times a day. I finally blocked the number, but then a new one popped up, then another. Here's the thing, though. I'm not scared. I'm not even surprised. I've been waiting for this moment since I was 15 years old. Something happened. They need something from me now. And I've spent 2 decades making sure that when this day came, I'd be holding all the cards. Update coming once I figure out exactly what they want. Because whatever it is, the answer is going to cost them everything. 21 years of silence. 21. No birthday cards. No hey, we're sorry. No drunk dial at 2 a.m. with a half-hearted apology. Nothing. And now it's urgent? Now they need to talk? Funny how urgent only exists when they need something. When their 15-year-old was drowning, there was no urgency. When he was eating government cheese in foster homes, no urgency. When he was working through college alone, no urgency. But the moment their comfort is threatened, 40 calls a day. And I love that he's been preparing for this. Most people would have either completely cut ties mentally or spent years in therapy trying to forgive. This man chose option C, become so successful and so strategically positioned that when the inevitable happened, he'd be ready. That's not healing. That's not healthy. But you know what? I'm not going to sit here and tell a drowning victim how they should have swum. Update 1. First off, thanks to everyone who commented. A lot of you asked how they even got my number. I wondered the same thing until Priscilla finally left a voicemail admitting that she found me through a mutual connection at my old high school reunion page on Facebook. I never attended any reunion, but my foster sister Clara tagged me in a throwback photo years ago. That's all it took. One tagged photo and suddenly my past can reach through the screen. I decided to stop dodging and get this over with. Not because I wanted closure or whatever therapeutic nonsense people suggest. I wanted intelligence. I needed to know exactly what they wanted so I could figure out how to use it against them. I texted Priscilla from a burner phone I picked up at a gas station. Told her I'd meet them once at the Kroger parking lot on Wayne Avenue. Saturday at noon. Public space, daytime, my terms. They showed up in the same Chevy Blazer. 21 years and they're still driving that thing. Though it looks like it's held together with rust and prayers now. Connor got out first. He's smaller than I remember. Gray. Hunched. Priscilla followed, and she looked exhausted in a way that seemed permanent. Connor started immediately with how they'd been looking for me for years and how they thought about me every day. I cut him off and told him to save it because I didn't come for a reunion. I asked what they wanted. That's when Priscilla broke down. Not crying exactly, more like her whole face just collapsed. She told me their landlord Damien had sold their rental property 6 weeks ago. The new owners want everyone out by the end of next month. They've been in that house for 19 years, she said. Like that was supposed to mean something to me. They can't afford first and last month's rent anywhere else. Their credit is destroyed. They have nowhere to go. Same Chevy Blazer. Same one. These people have been financially treading water for 2 decades, and somehow that's supposed to make me feel sympathy? You had 21 years without a child to feed, clothe, and educate. 21 years of just yourselves. And you're still broke? Still driving the murder vehicle? You know what this tells me? The kid was never the problem. The kid was the excuse. We'd be in Denver living our dreams if it wasn't for you. No, you wouldn't. You'd be in Denver in the same financial hole. Because the hole isn't circumstantial, it's constitutional. They blamed a child for their own inability to build anything. And now they've had 2 decades to prove they could thrive without him. And look at them. Gray, hunched, exhausted, still renting, credit destroyed. The trash took itself out and still couldn't figure out how to be functional adults. I asked why that was my problem. Connor jumped in saying they knew I'd done well for himself and that families help each other. He actually said that. Families help each other. I had to laugh. I asked him if families also abandon their 15-year-old sons at lakes to drown. He tried to explain. He said they were young and overwhelmed and made mistakes. He said they thought I'd figure it out and come home, and they didn't think it would go so far. They waited for me to come back, and when I didn't, they assumed I'd found something better. They convinced themselves I was fine. I told him that was convenient. I told him I wasn't fine. I told him I was in the foster system for 3 years, eating government cheese and sleeping in houses with 6 other kids while they went on living their lives like I never existed. Priscilla tried a different approach. She said they were different people now, that they'd changed, that they went to church, that they'd been praying for this chance to make things right. She grabbed my arm and begged me to let them prove themselves. They thought I'd figure it out and come home. Come home? Come home to what? The house where you told me I was bleeding you dry? The parents who threw a half-deflated tube at my chest and drove away laughing? What exactly was supposed to make a 15-year-old think, yeah, let me just swim to shore, hitchhike 40 minutes back, and knock on the door of the people who just tried to kill me? And then, they assumed he found something better. Something better. Like what, Connor? A nice family of raccoons took him in? A generous lake spirit adopted him? They didn't assume anything. They just stopped thinking about it because thinking about it would require acknowledging what they did. And now Priscilla's pulling the church card. Of course they found Jesus. Nothing brings people to religion faster than needing something from someone they wronged. God becomes real convenient when you need a co-signer on your apology. Here's where it gets complicated. Because everything I'd planned for 21 years assumed they'd stay the same arrogant people who threw me away. But watching them grovel in that parking lot, I realized something worse. They hadn't changed at all. They still only cared about me when they needed something. The apology wasn't real, it was transactional. So I made a decision. I told them I'd think about helping them. I told them I had rental properties and maybe I could work something out. Priscilla started thanking God right there in the Kroger parking lot. Connor shook my hand and called me son for the first time in my life. What they don't know is that I have no intention of helping them. What they don't know is that I've already started researching their current landlord situation. And what they definitely don't know is that I spent 16 years in property management, specifically, so I'd understand exactly how to make someone's housing situation a living nightmare. This is just the beginning. Update coming soon. Connor called him son for the first time in his life, at 36 years old, in a Kroger parking lot, because he needs something. That word, son, should be sacred. It should mean something. And this man weaponized it as a transaction receipt. Thank you for considering helping us. Here's a son for your trouble. You know what this reminds me of? When someone's rude to you for months and then suddenly they're sweet because they need a ride to the airport. Except the rudeness here was attempted murder. And I'm seeing people in comments already saying, but revenge won't heal him. And he should forgive for his own peace. And like, sure, philosophically maybe. But you know what else doesn't heal you? Letting people who tried to drown you benefit from the life you built despite them. Sometimes peace isn't forgiveness. Sometimes peace is justice. And this man is about to serve it cold. Update 2. So a lot has happened since my last post and I need to get this out because things are escalating faster than I anticipated. First, Connor and Priscilla have been texting me constantly on the burner number, asking when I'll have an answer, sending pictures of the eviction notice, telling me they're running out of time. The new owners gave them until the 15th of next month. That's 18 days from now. But here's what really set me off. My foster sister Clara messaged me on Instagram 3 days ago, asking why some woman named Priscilla was commenting on her old posts trying to get more information about me. Clara had no idea about my history with them. I never told her the full story, just that I didn't have contact with my biological family. Now, Priscilla is out there stalking my connections trying to find leverage or information or who knows what. Clara was confused and a little freaked out. I had to explain everything. The lake, the drowning, the abandonment, all of it. She was furious on my behalf and asked what she could do to help. I told her to just block Priscilla and stay out of it. This is my fight. Then, on Monday, Connor showed up at one of my properties. My building on Henderson Road. I don't know how he found it, but property records are public, so I guess he did some digging. He was waiting in the parking lot when I pulled in to meet with my maintenance guy. He got out of that rusted blazer and walked right up to me like we were old buddies. See, this is why I can't get on board with the "they've changed" narrative. Changed people don't stalk your foster sister's Instagram trying to dig up information. Changed people don't show up unannounced at your place of business. Changed people don't send 40 texts a day with eviction notice, photos like emotional ransom notes. This is the behavior of people who see other humans as resources to be extracted from. They're not reconnecting with their son, they're working a mark. And the fact that they're now pulling Clara into this? A woman who actually did show up for this man? Who was actually family when family was just a word these people used to manipulate? Priscilla scrolling through Clara's posts, commenting, trying to find an angle. That's not desperation, that's predation. Desperation knocks on doors. Predation hunts through your social network looking for soft entry points. He started off calm, saying he understood I needed time to think, but that time was something they didn't have. He said Priscilla wasn't sleeping. He said they'd looked at 12 different apartments and got rejected from all of them because of their credit and rental history. He said their only option was a shelter, and could I really let my own parents end up in a shelter? I asked him if he could really let his own son drown in a lake. He didn't have an answer for that. Then he changed tactics. He started talking about how maybe we got off on the wrong foot at Kroger. He said they should have led with gratitude instead of desperation. He told me how proud they were of what I'd built, how they always knew I had potential, how the whole situation at the lake was supposed to be a lesson about self-reliance, and it just got out of hand. A lesson. He called attempted murder a lesson. I kept my composure though. Because here's the thing about revenge. You can't let them see you coming. So I told him I'd been thinking and I might have a solution. I told him I have a vacant unit in my smallest building. 2-bedroom. Nothing fancy. But it would keep them off the streets. They always knew I had potential. Always knew. Brother, you left him to die. If you always knew he had potential, maybe don't try to extinguish him in a lake. You don't get to plant a bomb under someone's life and then show up 30 years later talking about, "We always believed in you," and calling it a lesson about self-reliance. A lesson. Here's what a lesson looks like. Son, I'm not going to buy you that video game. You need to earn money and buy it yourself. Here's what attempted murder looks like. Everything else in this story. The audacity to rebrand drowning your child as an educational experience is genuinely impressive. Like, from a pure manipulation standpoint, the mental gymnastics required to say that out loud and expect it to land? Olympic-level delusion. And I love that our guy kept his composure. That's the discipline of someone who's been waiting 2 decades for this exact moment. He's not going to fumble it on a parking lot confrontation. His whole demeanor shifted. He started thanking me, saying he knew I'd come through, saying, "Blood is thicker than water." I let him go on for a while. Then I told him there would be conditions. A lease agreement like any other tenant. First month's rent plus security deposit. Background check. The works. He started to protest that they couldn't afford deposits right now, and I held up my hand and told him I'd waive the deposit as a family courtesy, but the lease terms would be strict. Any violation, and they're out. No exceptions. He agreed immediately. Didn't even ask what the terms were. What Connor doesn't understand is that I'm not giving them charity. I'm giving them a leash. Every clause in that lease is designed to give me complete legal authority over their living situation. Late payment by 1 day, violation. Noise complaint, violation. Unapproved guest, violation. They're about to become my tenants, and I'm about to become the landlord they deserve. More soon. This is just getting started. He agreed immediately. Didn't even ask what the terms were. This is poetic in ways I don't think even OP fully appreciates. 21 years ago, a 15-year-old got in a car for a family trip without asking questions because he trusted his parents. He didn't know the terms. He didn't know the destination. He just hoped if he went along with it, things would get better. And now? Connor signs a lease without reading it because he's desperate and trusting that his son won't hurt him. The roles are completely reversed. The blind trust that got a child nearly killed is now the blind trust that will undo his abusers. And look, I see comments coming about how this is entrapment, how it's manipulative, how two wrongs don't make a right. And maybe from a cosmic karma standpoint, that's true. But there's something deeply satisfying about watching someone face consequences using the exact same vulnerability they once exploited. Final update. They moved in 11 days ago, and as of yesterday morning, they're out. Let me explain how fast this unraveled. The lease I drafted had standard Ohio landlord-tenant provisions plus additional clauses about maintenance responsibilities, quiet hours, and guest policies. Nothing illegal, nothing a court wouldn't uphold. Just strict. The kind of strict that gives a landlord options. They violated the lease on day 3. Connor's brother Damien, yes, the same Damien who sold their previous rental property, showed up with a truck full of furniture. He wasn't on the approved occupant list. I sent them a written warning within 24 hours. Day 6. Priscilla was smoking on the balcony. The lease explicitly prohibits smoking anywhere on the property. Second written warning. Day 9. Rent was due. They paid 4 days late because Connor's disability check came in behind schedule. Third violation. 3 strikes in Ohio means I can begin eviction proceedings with cause. But before I filed anything, I drove over there. I wanted to talk to them face-to-face one more time. Not because I was wavering, because I wanted them to understand exactly what was happening and why. Connor answered the door and immediately started explaining about the check being late and how it wasn't his fault. I told him to stop. I told him I wasn't there about the rent. I walked into that apartment, my apartment, and I sat down at the kitchen table where Priscilla was drinking instant coffee. I told them both to sit. They did. 3 violations in 9 days. These people couldn't follow basic lease terms for 9 days. And look, some people might say, well, the lease was designed to trap them. And sure, the terms were strict, but they weren't impossible. Don't have unapproved guests. Don't smoke on the property. Pay rent on time. These are the bare minimum requirements of being a functional tenant. Millions of people manage this every single month. But Connor and Priscilla? They couldn't even perform being decent people for 2 weeks when their housing depended on it. That tells you who they fundamentally are. They've spent their whole lives believing rules are for other people. Consequences are for other people. Accountability is for other people. And now, sitting at that kitchen table, they're about to learn that the other people eventually includes them. I asked them if they remembered what Connor said to me at that lake in July 21 years ago. Priscilla looked away. Connor said he didn't remember exactly, I reminded him. Swim or sink, you ungrateful brat, prove you're worth something. Then I told them that's exactly what I did. I swam. I proved I was worth something. And I did it without them. I did it despite them. Every property I own, every dollar I've earned, Every night I've slept in a bed I paid for myself represents me swimming while they expected me to sink. Priscilla started crying and saying they made mistakes and they were sorry and couldn't we start fresh. I told her starting fresh would require her to lose everything first, the way I lost everything when I was 15. I asked her if she was ready to lose everything. She didn't answer. Connor said he didn't remember exactly. 21 years this man has been carrying those exact words in his chest. Swim or sink, you ungrateful brat. Those words shaped every decision he made. Every late night studying, every property acquisition, every dollar saved. He built an empire on the fuel of those words. And Connor doesn't remember. That's the thing about cruelty. The people who inflict it rarely keep receipts. To Connor, that day at the lake was probably just a Tuesday, one of many days where he did something thoughtless and cruel and then moved on with his life. But to his son, that Tuesday was the end of one life and the beginning of another. The asymmetry of trauma is wild like that. The person who hurt you might not even remember hurting you, but you remember. You remember forever. I told them I was filing for eviction based on documented lease violations. I told them they had the legal right to contest it, but that I had more money for lawyers than they had time. I told them they could fight me in court or they could leave voluntarily within 72 hours, and I'd return their first month's rent as a gesture of goodwill. Connor stood up and got in my face. He called me cruel. He said I was punishing them for something that happened decades ago. He said holding on to anger like this would destroy me. I told him it already did destroy me when I was 15. And then I rebuilt myself into someone who could never be thrown away again. They were gone by the next morning. Left the keys on the counter. No note. No goodbye. Just the same silence they gave me for 21 years. Connor called him cruel. Connor, the man who drove away from a lake with his drowning son in the rearview mirror. The man who never filed a missing persons report. The man who showed up 21 years later only because he needed something. That guy looked his son in the face and said, "You're cruel." And holding on to anger will destroy you. The lack of self-awareness is actually staggering. It's like an arsonist showing up to complain that you won't let him warm his hands on the flames. And you know what's actually devastating? That last part. No note. No goodbye. Just keys on the counter. They left the same way they always treated him. Silently, without acknowledgement. Like he was never worth the effort of actual communication. Even in losing, they couldn't muster the basic human decency of a goodbye. That's who they are. That's who they've always been. My foster sister Clara asked if I feel better now. I don't know how to answer that. I don't feel healed. I don't feel closure. But I feel something I haven't felt since I was a kid gasping for air in that lake. I feel like I'm finally above water. They tried to teach me to swim or sink. They just didn't expect me to become the one controlling the current.